Olivia, this is Peter. Do you need me to be virtual usher here? I'm signed up.
Let me set you as. You're off the hook, Molly. I got Peter.
It's all good.
Thank you so much, though. I'll keep you as co-host just in case something needs to happen.
People are joining in.
Yeah. I did a few years ago with Makom Halev, Rabbi Doris Dayan's Haftarah, a real gallery tour around the room, showing the different scenes of Jonah, letting people sort of take in maybe 4 different pieces of art for each scene. And then we came together and talked about what resonated with us. For today, I've chosen to just focus on depicting Jonah in the fish, rather than go the whole way around the story. I think I found some stuff that I like, and I hope you will too. Give people a couple more minutes to get here while I get us up on YouTube. How's everyone's day going so far? Feelings about the service? Anything like that?
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah, boy. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really so beautiful, and just there's something I think ends up in your bones, in your soul, about those tunes that when you really start coming back to them every year.
Yeah. Yeah, so beautiful. Just moving, huh?
Yeah, very, very moving. But that's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the design.
Yeah.
If it didn't work, we would be, sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it didn't work, we'd have a different tradition, I think.
Yeah, but it worked beautifully. And Molly, thank you so much, and Dawn, and
Yeah, Molly sings so beautifully too.
yeah.
Boy, all that energy to be able to sing like that, so endure over that. I mean, just a lot of singing. Wow, beautiful.
Wonderful, Molly and Dawn. We wouldn't have no singing.
Yeah, Dawn's piano is playing so beautiful too.
Oh, I see, Molly, you're in the chapel. So how are the services going? The hourly services?
Oh, I'm not actually in the chapel.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No.
Oh, I can see now that I made the picture bigger. I can see. Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, I can. My virtual background is turned off for some reason.
It's not usually my thing. I usually prefer to beautify my own space, but I don't know. I was just feeling like doing in the chapel today.
Mm-hmm. For the proportions about right. If you were sitting there, it looks about right. Like you could reach around and open the box, pull something off the table there.
I think it would be also for having everything done properly.
One more time?
I want to thank you for everything done properly.
Oh, you are so welcome. We're a really good team. I think we've had a lot of good practice, everyone who's involved in making sure it all goes smoothly. Since starting all these online services in March, is sort of a summit for all of that.
Kirsten to make it proper everything.
There's like a line in movie making about how if the editing is good, you'll never notice it.
Looking forward.
I think that feels relevant. Okay, I feel like we have a good crowd. We're gonna keep on getting, I think, a couple people coming in, but welcome to Jonah, a virtual gallery crawl. I think the first thing we should do is go over the story of Jonah. Make sure that we're all here. We're gonna be focusing in on one particular scene, but I think perhaps we can tell the story of Jonah for each other. I've laid out the different sort of stages of the story and get us talking. Anybody come off of mute who wants to come off of mute to describe the certain things that happen in each part here. So I'll start us off. Jonah is what we call the call. Jonah is called by God to do what? To go to a town, go to a city called Nineveh and tell them that God's going to destroy them, so they better repent. What does Jonah do in response to this call from God? Is it up on the screen? Who wants to tell us? You can just read the words that are right there on the screen if you want to. I know someone's brave enough to read them.
I still see people.
You still see people? Am I not screen sharing the?
I see the
What?
screen
You are.
share, Olivia.
I see the screen.
Call.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
He ran from the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonah was like, I don't want to do that. It sounds hard and it sounds scary and it sounds like much more than I have. I got a busy schedule and I can't go to Nineveh and tell them that they need to repent.
Yeah.
So he goes
Yeah,
to,
it's,
cut it out.
it's kind of all about me. You know, it's all about Yona. Right.
So Jonah goes to a port city called Tarshish, and he gets on a boat trying to go as far away from Nineveh as possible. And what happens on that boat? What happens there on the sea?
He is thrown from the ship.
Yeah, there's a great storm. The passengers are like, whose God is this who's doing it to us? And they're like, probably the guy who's sleeping downstairs and trying to not be part of the conversation. And he's like, yes, it's me, throw me overboard. And the sea calms. And so he winds up in the sea. And where does he end up specifically in the sea?
Whale.
In the fish.
In a fish. And we'll go over what happens in that fish in chapter 2. But eventually he is spit up from the fish. And after that, God says to him, what?
Or Nineveh.
Yeah, go to Nineveh, warn them about this whole destruction thing. He says, fine, I think I'll do it this time. You made your point. And he goes to Nineveh and he warns them. And Nineveh, from the king to the oxen, repent and put on sackcloth and hold a fast and really buy it. And Jonah becomes really bitter about that in something that, in a scene that is not going to be really our purview, but something to meditate on about his frustration with the fact that they did repent, and why, and sort of griping about why God would care about them. It's complicated and involves a gourd plant that gives him shade, and then he loses his shade, and he's very, very frustrated about that loss. And God says, why weren't you frustrated about the potential loss of all these Ninevites? And there we have kind of our only successful prophet in the entire Bible, who got a group of non-Jews to change their heart.
Yeah, so his prejudice against the Ninevites builds up this hatred and this resentment at having preached and having done teshuvah. Yeah, that is a lesson in, about prejudice and ethnocentricity and chauvinism, because that's what's bubbling inside of his kishkis.
Amen. So we're going to focus on this stage, the fish. I have for us Jonah chapter 2, so we can read what's going on in the text, and then we'll look at different depictions of what's going on in this chapter. I think we've got people talking, so anybody who's brave who wants to read as much on this page as you want to, we have it up. And I could see hands raised. I don't see any, but if you want to use the raise hand function, that's fine too.
The Eternal provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah,
And Jonah remained in the fish's belly 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah prayed to the Eternal his God from the belly of the fish. He said, "In my trouble I called to the Eternal, and God answered me. From the belly of Sheol I cried out, and you heard my voice. You cast me into the depths, into the heart of the sea. The floods engulfed me. All your breakers and billows swept over me. I thought I was driven away out of your sight. Would I ever gaze again upon your holy temple?"
Thank you. An interesting thing I want to point out in the Hebrew before we go to the second part of his prayer is that Jonah is in a huge fish, a dog, and then somehow in the second verse is in hadaga. And if you know your Hebrew well, you'll notice that the first part is a masculine word, and in the second verse is a feminine word, which, being your resident transgender Jewish passionate educator, I will not let us slip away from, and we will reach back to what's going on in this gender changing fish. Not the main focus, but I just want to point it out here while you have it. Feelings about the text right off the bat. What's his imagery like? Is he talking about the desert? No, he's talking about the sea, right? He's in the sea. Yeah. Cool. Any thought? Anything really cool here?
It's a really beautiful description of what, being overwhelmed by anything could be like. And then kind of the redemption from that.
Thank you. Yeah, you cast me into the depths, into the hearts of the sea. The floods engulfed me. All your breakers and billows swept over me. He feels he's in Sheol. Sheol being one of the Jewish afterlife sort of visions, a huge pit where everyone ends up and is not really pleasant, but just the way of it, sort of a burial grave. And this feeling, would I ever gaze upon your holy temple? Will I ever, which is that feeling of, will I ever get out of this? This thing that I'm in, will I ever get out of it? And that's a literal fish, maybe, but probably also anybody who's been in a place of ruminating in an oppressive mode.
Yeah, the analogy between the belly of the fish and the belly of Sheol, I mean, it's a sense of almost a death rehearsal, is very tied to some of the concepts of our rituals on Yom Kippur.
Yes,
Yeah.
where we don't eat because we don't drink if you're fasting, right? Because you wouldn't need to when you die.
No sensation.
Here's the rest of Jonah's song. Do we have a new reader for these next verses here?
I'll read.
Thank you.
The waters closed in over me. The deep engulfed me. Weeds twined around my head. I sank to the base of the mountains. The bars of the earth closed upon me forever. Yet you brought my life up from the pit, O Eternal, my God. When my life was ebbing away, I called the Eternal to mind, and my prayer came before you into your holy temple. They who cling to empty folly forsake their own welfare, but I, with loud thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will perform. Deliverance is the Eternal's. The Eternal commanded the fish, and it spewed Jonah out upon dry land.
Thank you. So Jonah turns hopeful in this second part, turns hopeful about the power of prayer before he even sees the results of that prayer, which is something I don't think I'd noticed before this read, is that very often we expect to see results of our prayers and we don't see them, and maybe we say this is not worth it at all, or we expect to see certain results and we get different ones. other feelings about the text before we move into some art about it?
Line 9 there, those who cling to empty folly forsake their own welfare. It seems very related to what we're talking about today with Yom Kippur and looking forward to what we can do next rather than ruminating on the past.
I love that. Yeah. He's saying like anybody who's running away, right? The running away ended me up in this place. Not confronting this, whatever our Nineveh is head on, is what ended me up in a fish. Which it's really scary. I don't blame Jonah for running. It's really terrifying. Sometimes God seems really scary. Or sometimes the pressure of what we know we have to do seems really, really hard and scary. And running away is also seems easier, but doesn't always reward us in the way we want. We've talked a little bit about this so far, but what things seem most visual to you about this passage? You can come off mute or think about it for yourself. In Jonah's prayer, so we have both the imagery, the actual literal imagery of what's happening, and also the images that Jonah brings forth. Then what metaphors might we expect to see depicted in art? And of course, thinking about for your personal, how and why might you depict this scene? What choices would you make about the fish, about how Jonah looks, about his thoughts and how literal they are, and what's present and what's not, what's implied, what kind of materials you might use, and what the difference between a black and white photograph or a watercolor would resonate about the emotionality of this scene.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does anyone feel when I look at this about Jonah's prayer, does anyone feel a connection to Isaiah 58? That he might be going through a ritual that he may not fully believe, and that maybe it's a ritual that does not fool God. Just a thought.
Oh, he thinks that like, are you saying that maybe Jonah's just going through the motions of what he thinks he's supposed to say? And God buys it by letting him out of the fish, but maybe he didn't really believe it himself? I think that's a legitimate read. I think that's very legitimate. Jonah certainly doesn't like understand the full nature of everything that's going on until the end of his story. And I think that although we can say all of the words of the prayer service, they might not resonate with us until the end of Nila and a week later. So, and yet we still have a tradition which says, and God forgives, that we do our best and God forgives us. Okay, so our first piece, some of you who've come to services a lot might recognize this artist, Christina Madison Ebert, who you can find her Drosh designs on her website. She does every Torah portion and also some for the holidays. And this is her Jonah. What do we see here? Anyone want to describe this picture? I think we have a couple people on a phone. So a description from somebody who wants to just talk about what they're looking at would be really helpful, I think.
Yeah. It looks like Jonah inside the fish.
Yeah. Does he have a lot of room?
No, he's sort of in a
fetal position.
Fetal position, yeah.
Yeah. What about the colors?
Well, Jonah doesn't look too healthy.
No, he looks very misshapen and cramped. The fish, you can tell, is this outline, a kind of blue outline, while the fish innards are these triangles of red. And Jonah himself is golden with a sort of crossed lattice on top of him. It's very tight. So Christina says, the text itself is silent as to what exactly Jonah experiences inside the belly of the fish as it churns in the ocean. Yet the implication, so actually she's quoting from Rabbi Miriam Klotz from the Women's Haftarah commentary. Yet the implication is that the fish's belly is an enclosure for generativity and birth, a womb-like container within which Jonah might be symbolically gestated for a period of time and born anew.
Yeah. Yeah.
She talks about her depiction, saying Jonah is in a fetal position, surrounded, bound up, and nurtured by his own fluid spirituality and capacity for introspection. I love that idea. I think it's I think very often when we hear a Jonah story and we hear about this scene, it's depicted as Jonah being captured in captivity, in prison, bound up in a very in punishing way. And I appreciate that this interpretation gives us a Jonah who is being nurtured in a womb-like state, who's ready to be born anew, who is not being punished with the fish as much as being given a new life through this situation. Thoughts and feelings, you can keep them coming. You can also use the chat if that's more comfortable than you for coming off of mute.
I like specifically the shade of purple that she chose is something that I feel like is used in a lot of feminist art. And so it makes sense, the thinking behind that.
Thank you. And if somebody says 5 minutes from now, hey, I just thought of something with this one, can we go back to it? Let me know. All the slides are right here at our fingertips. So I'm happy to head back. The next depiction I have for us is by Ismar David, who's the legendary typeface designer. If you've ever worked in Word or any kind of typefaces and you've seen David as an option for your Hebrew font, that was made by this guy. And I watched a really good documentary about the designing of that typeface while trying to find comments about his Jonah artwork, which I did not find. But I love the way he works in lines and geometry. These depictions show anything that is drawn with kind of straight lines that make geometric designs and feel very cracked, also very spider web to me. Sometimes some ripples for the waves. And we have two of them, one being a card that you would send that was created to be sent for the high holidays, and the other one for his full Jonah illustration, where you can see two different poses, one where Jonah is in the fish and is lifting his hands up to the sky, which I don't think you can see, but he might believe is still there, and the other one where he is looking almost through the eye of the fish outwards and has sunk into the space that he has for himself here. And we quote, "The waters closed in over me, the deep engulfed me, weeds twined around my head, I sank to the base of the mountains, the bars of the earth closed upon me." And then he separates the word forever with a dot between each letter and has around Jonah the text in brilliant typeface, I think. And so the questions I prepared for us are what's the geometry doing for you? What's the line work indicating? And perhaps what are the fonts bringing out for you about this work?
through the throat. Yeah. Well,
The lines appear as if he's being imprisoned or held.
Yeah, the lines do feel like bars when they go across him.
I see the lines another way. I see that kind of geometry always as the possibility of examining an image from many angles all at the same time. And so that applies to him as the character, and it applies to us as the viewers and the interpreters, which doesn't mean that the bar concept is wrong. It just means that there's more than one way of looking at that kind of geometry in an image.
Absolutely. I love both of those so much. Wow, yeah, that he's not quite in a cubist world, but he does invoke that sort of cubist. I'm getting a lot of feedback, or not feedback, it's just a background conversation somewhere. It's gone now.
You know, and I was thinking too, Olivia, that like she said with the geometry of it, it's like it invokes dimensions. Like she was saying, it's like different perspectives. He's grasping what the Eternal is trying to tell him, you know, is telling him in that,
Yes.
like in a meditative mode with it.
Trying to see all of those different angles. The lines
Yeah.
do invoke that cubist world, where they were showing in 2 dimensions what something could look like from many different angles. I love that. I think that's really nice.
I like the typeface in the English. It looks kind of like Torah text.
Oh, interesting. With the kind of like larger, the crowns a little bit, the way it's drawn with the pen, with the ink.
Yeah.
For me, the way the geometric shapes fit together, there's no space in between and everything is filled up and like aligned together.
Thank you. I have on the same mode of geometric Jonah, Jonah in tangrams. Tangrams being a geometric puzzle of Chinese origin, consisting of a square cut into 7 pieces that you can arrange into many different shapes. And these Jonah tangrams by the Bible Balabusta show us how you can turn Jonah into the fish. I just wanted to, I found this when I was going through my like stash of Jonah artwork, and I love this concept so much, where the same shapes that make up Jonah can make up the fish, and she gives you the answers down at the bottom for how to do it, but that interconnectedness, where we often relate to Jonah in the story, but yet the fish is a big player too, and I'm wondering sort of what to make of our connection with the fish, and if the fish is just a tool in the story, or if we should see ourselves in the fish as well, in the times where like we hold on to somebody, helping them be in a space where they can understand something deeper, and how we move from times when we're Jonah into times when we're the fish, and then back again, and then just into a scramble of little flocks.
I think when we talk about the idea of morphing Jonah into the fish, to me suggests a kind of oneness with the fish. You know, that in some ways, you know, he's the fish. You know, when he is in the water, when he's in the belly, that he becomes as mobile and as vulnerable, you know, as the fish. An interesting metaphor.
Yeah.
Well, to take that another step, it suggests, although this isn't scriptural, it suggests that he may be both his own captor and his own liberator.
Yeah.
Whoa. I want you in all my classes.
Thank you. I want you in all my classes.
All right, let me know when. That's really brilliant. That's really brilliant. Thank you. While we're in the world of sort of views for children, we have two images from Jonah and the Two Great Fish by Mordecai Gerstein. This is depicting a particular midrash. I'll show you this one, and we're gonna look at this one. So by the same author in the same book. In this first one, I'll read you the comments first. Rashi, a commentator in France in the 11th century, among others, imagined that Jonah, okay, so this goes back to, I'm gonna flip back some slides to look at the text again. So just, it's gonna flash before you for a second. But we remember we have these two different spellings of dog. We have dog and we have daga. And the rabbis have had many centuries to say, that's not a typo, that's a call for deeper understanding. So they offer this understanding. I think maybe I would teach that the fish was just non-binary and was a gender fluid fish living in fluid waters, but that's another drash for another day. I'll bring you Rashi, who says, among others, Rashi imagined that Jonah was comfortable in the belly of the fish, since being great and masculine, because masculine always has to mean bigger for some reason, it was too roomy to compel Jonah to call out to God. He even had nice views as the eyes served as windows. And you see here this Jonah in a very fanciful sea with mermaids and crabs and sharks and a sea lion mermaid type, that he has a 4-poster bed with drapings and a nice carpet and a checkered rug, and the mouth even looks like a grand staircase, and his porthole shows him an octopus, and he has a chandelier, and he's eating a whole feast.
It seems like not at all how fish biology works, though. You can't see out the eyes.
But it is reflective of situations where we as individuals want to stay in that womb. You know, we want to stay in that comfortable place and not grow. That's what that suggests to me. Or you think of Adam and Chava in the garden. The garden is a womb, and until they leave the womb, they're in a state of kind of adolescent innocence, of childlike innocence. And it's, when they grow up to discover their consciousness, that they are then cast out. I mean, it just reminds me of situations where personally I've been stuck, in that space, too much comfort to get out there and face challenges in reality.
So what does God do upon realizing that Jonah is too comfortable to get the point?
Yeah.
Seeing this, God said, I made him a spacious place in the belly of the fish so that he would not be in pain, but he still will not pray to me. I shall prepare for him a pregnant fish carrying 365,000 fry so that he will be in pain and pray to me. The male fish is then commanded to spit the unfortunate prophet into the mouth of a second fish, already full of baby fish, also called roe or eggs. Now, cramped and uncomfortable, the distressed Jonah was moved to pray. And in the picture, we have Jonah smashed up against quite beautiful striped fish who all look very cramped and uncomfortable themselves. And he fits like a tessellation inside of them with his arms outstretched. This is reminding me this sort of duress, like godly duress, of a midrash about receiving Torah at Sinai, where it's said that the Bible, I believe, is the one that says that we were under the mountain, and rabbis said, oh, literally? And imagine God lifting up Mount Sinai and turning it upon us and saying, accept Torah or perish, which, you know, agreements under duress like that can't be accepted, like in a court of law. And so we take every Shavuot, for example, to reaffirm that we do accept Torah as ours. And it troubles me, this Jonah story, right, where he's in the fish, and even if you don't have this midrash, he's in a position where he doesn't have a lot of options other than to say, okay, God, you're God, you get to control this situation. I'm in, I get it. And I like that he's given another chance later on with the gourd to come back to the idea again and really get the kind of care that God wants to have over the world, even the people who seem like maybe they don't deserve a second chance. Other feelings as we move along?
A lot of this reminds me of, as someone said earlier, about being stuck, but also somewhat of like being in a deep depression or deep state of depression where you're kind of comfortable there, even though it's painful, but you don't want to change until things get really bad. Like something like, or a bad situation that you're in that you won't change until you really, 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 really have to. And reminds me maybe of why this story is also connected to Yom Kippur, where, you know, not eating, not drinking, and it makes us a bit uncomfortable so that we will be more focused on doing the work that we need to do in our lives to change for the new year.
I really like that, Caleb.
A fish can swim, but they're also at the mercy of the currents, and they're just swept away, whereas he's not taking responsibility and taking agency for himself.
Thank you, Caleb. I really resonated with that. There's my mom does counseling and likes to bring to our dinner table the idea of we only change when the pain of staying put is worse than the pain of changing. That we would have changed earlier if we could have, but we weren't ready. We didn't have it. And I wish that there were other things to motivate us other than pain. I don't know if that's just how humanity works, or if we need to cultivate within ourselves, probably the latter, that we need to cultivate within ourselves other reasons to change than pain.
I think that, you know, we can also be positively motivated, although ultimately humans are really focused on themselves, but I think that we can be positively motivated. Like if we, you know, sometimes we can change because we're motivated by love, and sometimes we can be changed because we're motivated by somebody else who inspires us. So it's not always pain, but a lot of times it ends up being pain.
One more while we're in sort of children-oriented art. I think that everybody has something artistic to bring to the table. This is a Jonah Art Project that you could do with your kids. They offer this idea. The instruction is challenge the children to imagine what they would think about if they had run away, and then it asks maybe from God, maybe any kind of running away, and ended up in the belly of a big fish. And something that I really like that they offered was this idea of fish as quiet place. There's the still small voice that we talk about on Yom Kippur, and cultivating quiet places that are meditative is a really important practice. And giving the opportunity for the children, but for really anyone, giving yourself the opportunity to actually sit inside a big fish for a short time and think about what it's like what went through your mind, and just the sincerity of the statement. I would think about being a good friend has really resonates with me in what I would be in the fish. Okay, back in the adult side of the world, Shoshana Brombacher, another favorite of mine who does a lot of biblical artwork, presents us with this Yona in the sea. This one is a lot of, it feels, I think it's crayon with different watercolor paints. It's very sketch-like with the tail of the fish in a deep painted blue, with the blue sea, a mix of these wet paints and crayons, and I think some penciling for a few other fish around. Jonah himself, almost like, shape is this, like an hourglass shape, but not in the like fashion hourglass kind, the very uncomfortable to actually be in existence, is facing the tail and is in, I think, clear distress from the way his mouth and his hands are. The ribs of the fish are red and piercing and condensing as the eye heads downwards into the sea. She says about her own work in a general artist statement, "Art makes the world within the artist visible. My art is like the water of the canals of my native Amsterdam, Rembrandt city. The deeper you look into it, the more you see a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. Look, what you see is not what you see."
So Jonah is facing the, as you said, Olivia, Jonah is facing the back of the whale. And I don't know from the image whether he is misdirected or whether he has chosen not to look for the exit, but to be more introspective and to be more in the mode of examining his surroundings. And surroundings in this case would mean his inner life, perhaps his relationship to his God, all of those things. But I think that his placement, looking at the back, or as one of my kids would say, at the cloaca, is very provocative in spiritual terms.
Yeah, I love that. That he's still pushing away and he still doesn't know the right way to go, maybe, or that he is like, now he's like trying to explore everything there is to see.
All of those things.
It also almost looks like Jonah is turning into a fish if you look at the right-hand side of the illustration.
The way the legs are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, right. Well, I'm touching it here, but you can't see but it looks like a mermaid's tail almost.
Sure, the way the legs are folded and coming up toward him resembles sort of the triangle that's made from the fish's tail.
Right, like trying to power himself forward.
Feels like it connects back to our tangrams about Jonah turning into a fish.
He kind of like fighting against the stream. The fish is swimming one way, and so are the other fish in the image at the bottom. And Jonah's kind of struggling against it, fighting against, I guess, just surrendering to God, possibly.
Yeah, I just noticed these little teethy teeth. Do you see them at the bottom? The fish has. It's sort of one of those like, I don't know what point I'm trying to make, but I just think it's a goofy, aggressive face on this fish that she snuck into the bottom here. But somehow this feels goofy, but this feels, the ribs, the red ribs feel really painful to me. I don't know what her intention was. She didn't have a statement about this one in specific. But.
Well, it's like he's being skewered by the spine of the fish. It does look painful.
I have, I think, 2 more to show us. This one is just of the fish. This is by Jakob Steinhardt, and it's a woodcut. He has a series of Jonah woodcuts that you can look into, but I think are really choppy emotionally in the way that woodcuts feel like to me, about the ways that you make depth in woodcuts. And I'm just so struck by the light, which one might imagine as God calling to this fish, and the scene that might be implied to the fish, where God says, "I have a job for you. I've got a fella who won't do his job, and I'm wondering if you could be helpful today. Hey, I made fish before I made people. You know, I think I got it right with how you work." And just this expression on this fish is this is not how, this is a human eye on the
Right,
fish.
right. It's what I was going to say.
I don't know if that's supposed to be Jonah's eye looking out. Yeah, Peter, tell us about it.
No, that was my impression. It's a human eye. I mean, a fish eye doesn't look anything like that.
No. I don't know if it's supposed to be Jonah's eye looking out at the fish, or trying to call for that seeing of beingness, of living being within the fish, and that the fish is not just a tool for us to learn a lesson, but something to be really respected and cared for as well. That God cares so much for fish that God was like, "I have a special mission for you."
And there's also that identity again, what is the captor and what is the liberator, and when do they mesh somehow?
Yeah.
So I don't know if everybody has looked closely at this, but in our Machzor, in Mishkan HaNefesh, the beginning of each service, or the beginning of each part of the service, has a woodcut picture, and each one is on the different themes related to the services. So that, if you've got your Machzor handy later on, that'd be something to look at. I love what Olivia said about just like the intensity of not that just the intensity, but the incompleteness of the woodcuts.
Do you happen to have yours? Do you think you could?
Yeah, I do. I'll be right back and I'll go get it.
See if I can find it in the yeah, if anybody has their Machzor and knows what page it's on, I can find it in our flip book. But I have these last meditative questions to consider about what draws us to the Jonah story. This is our yearly, it's part of our yearly liturgy. It has, page 128. Does that make sense? The woodcut for Jonah specifically, I think he'd be later on, somewhere after page 400, I think.
Well, irrelevantly, but relevantly, this isn't Jonah, but on the page before the beginning of the afternoon service is a tangram, sort of.
Oh, wow. Oh, I love that.
It would be around page 324. No, 320. It's not Jonah, of course.
Oh, yeah. Here we are. Are folks seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's not Jonah. Let's see if we can find. Thank you for your patience. I had not thought to go to our Machzor, but of course, these are really striking. there's something, when I go looking for biblical artwork, I'm often very frustrated by how much, like, ooh, 535 is our next guess. Yeah, this feels right. Yep. Okay. Another Jonah for us. Where are we? We're in the fish. You can tell, I think, by the walls of the stomach, the way they drip, the way they have that, like you might see on your tongue, like taste buds on your tongue, and Jonah maybe, or light, is depicted here. This ball. I'm thinking about how parched we might feel by the time we reach Jonah if we're fasting and not taking in water, and how, ruge, is that how to pronounce that word, Claire?
Yes, ruge is, yeah.
Thank you. Ruge of the gastrointestinal system. Yes. I'm thinking about just like my own mouth, not to make people like aware of their tongue or anything, but just like the way that our own, like the words that we really wish we could say end up trapped, and how our tongue is our own Jonah inside of the fish of our mouth. Woo, that's something to meditate on. Thank you for finding that page, Richard. Yes. There's something about Jewish artwork to me that always feels a little more abstract. I think that when you look at the classic biblical depictions in the Renaissance era, they were going for such a very literal, with a lot of like iconography to it, but very literal depictions of the things that were happening. Of course, they got the race wrong most of the time, but that was a different political situation for them. But there's something so abstract to me about Jewish art that feels broken or feels warped, that leaves open so much room for interpretation, that I'm so glad people were able to draw out in our session today. I had one more joke for us, just to end with Hillary Pierce, Jewish cartoonist. I'm allowed to present this joke to you because I'm trans. The whale is on a chaise lounge in the therapist's office, and the whale is saying, I am a man trapped in a whale's body, and the therapist is saying, and how long have you felt this way, Mr. Jonah?
That's really funny.
A classic indeed. So, a Shana Tova to all, a meaningful fast. You can keep the room open if folks want for a few more minutes, or other thoughts about art, about what this has brought up for you, about Jonah, about the metaphors involved.
Thank you, Olivia.
So glad you're
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.